Welcome, everyone, to episode 329 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pantellaresco. I write stuff and podcasts too. Today, my guest is the one and only Rich Miller. Mr. Miller is a voiceover actor. He does audiobooks. It's always fun talking to people like this. My story with Rich is really, really funny. To me, I'm always amazed how people are nervous when they're coming on my show because I just me is me. I'm not really like a big deal or anything like that. So let's just have an interview and have some fun. And what turns out to happen is, once they realize this, you see their whole demeanor change. And Rich was one of those guys that just his demeanor got really, really chill. We talk about martinis a lot in this episode. So I mean, this was a fun conversation. So you should definitely check this out in just a minute. First things first, though. It's adventure time for me as it is. I'm looking for a place, but I mean, cool things still happen this week as a result. I'm featured on Go Indie Now. Joe Compton has me on a show called Spotlight. You want to hear how I put together this podcast? You can definitely listen to that show. It's up now. I make an ass of myself, and it's a good time, I promise. Check out Go Indie Now, Joe Compton stuff. He always does amazing things. Beyond all that, let's just get to our conversation now, shall we?
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
Caffeine, but I'm just letting you know that the official recorder is on. So
all right, we're recording.
We're recording. So anything incriminating, make it good.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
What about language?
As long as you're not a bigot, we're good.
Okay, no, that's not a problem at all. I just make sure.
I just say it that way because it's quicker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. It's just a lot quicker. I would say that 99.8% of the people I've interviewed have been nothing but amazing people. And so, I mean, it would almost never come up. But it's like, what can I say? What can't I say? It's like, you know what? Just don't be a dick. We're good.
Yeah, that's good. I just I put the explicit tag on my podcast on every episode just so that nobody ever has to wonder. But the fact is that I think I've only had people swear maybe 5 times.
I swear like a sailor, so it's kind of
okay.
So I'm totally guilty of it, right? So number one, I'm fair game. I'm fair game. But number two, it depends on my guest. Like for example, I've interviewed a 10-year-old. I'm not swearing to the 10-year-old. I'm just not. It's not cool. It's right at all, right? But I've also had conversations with people that are just like, you know what? What would it be like if we had a beer? That, and you know what? But that's all right. But like, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to any of my episodes or not. But if you did, it's just I'd rather you be genuine. So I
did.
Yeah, I'd rather you be genuine. If you're genuinely you, I'll work with that because that I feel will carry more weight than me, handcuffing myself. I do have sponsors, but they don't care either. So
yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of how that goes. Beyond all that, though, anything goes. So let's talk. Like, how many olives were in your martini to start with?
3. I almost always make a 3 olive martini, or a 3 onion Gibson. So started out with 3, and I've got 2 left. So I've got a bit of ways to go in the martini.
Yeah, you do. But I mean, it's like. We haven't asked anything, incriminating to make you go down like, oh look, all the olives are gone. Thank you. Have a good day. But no.
Always 3. That way I take my first sip, have an olive, have one somewhere in the middle, drain the glass, have the last one.
Okay, so there's a strategy. There's nothing mystical or magical about the number 3.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, you just like the symmetry of it. I gotcha.
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess we'll start with this one because you are my second narrator, voiceover actor. What is the right term for you in that way? Some people are comfortable with narrators, some people are comfortable as a voice actor. Where do you feel you fit?
I tend to say voice actor.
Yeah.
I don't really care that much, though. I hear this every once in a while. Well, you should say this, you should say that. I know people who do audiobooks primarily like I do, and they never use the term voice actor. They say, I'm an audiobook narrator. So I pretty much just use whatever comes to mind right the second somebody asks me. And so sometimes I'll say I'm a voice actor, and primarily I do audiobooks, or I'll say I'm an audiobook narrator. I used to use the term voice artist, but at some point I decided, I don't have anything against that term, and if somebody feels that, that's good. But you know what? I actually don't. It doesn't feel to me like that describes the way that I feel about it. And so I feel much more comfortable with voice actor or audiobook narrator.
Okay. I bring because when you said the way you said it, I cringed when you said voice artist. Like, I don't feel like that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, a voice definitely has a lot of power. I mean, we both have podcasts. We both know this, but right. I don't know. I don't consider me talking an art form. Me telling a story is an art form. How I tell a story is an art form.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes from, is that people who are voice actors who feel really comfortable with that terminology, they recognize that it is an art form, and they relate to that, and foremost in their mind is the fact that it's an art form, and they are an artistic person in one way. And so if somebody uses that term, I think, yeah, that's great. But I just realized that for me, it wasn't internal that way. I feel more like an actor, and so I use the term voice actor.
Which actually isn't that far from the truth either. I mean, one of the big things about any kind of voice acting, whether it's an audiobook or whether it's actually like an animated feature or a video game, you have to own those characters on some level. Like, there's got to be something about them that speaks to you.
Absolutely, yeah, and there has to be something that you bring to that character from your own experience.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, because you have to relate to that character, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, we all love. Like, I am a megalomaniacal enough to admit that I love writing my bad guys. They are so fun to write.
Mm-hmm.
But
they're fun to play too.
Absolutely, because you don't have to follow the standard rules. You can just be whatever you want to be, and it works and it's fine, provided.
Like you said, you have to relate, and the fact is that we all have anger. We all have negative emotions. We all have, times when we've wanted to do something that we knew we couldn't do, and having a bad guy to play, it's great because you get to tap into that and actually make use of it.
Absolutely, no, and that's the best stuff, right? But as it goes to relatability, yeah, anger's relatable, but why is like a bad guy? Like, villains don't become, generally speaking, the mustache twirling villain you saw way back in the 1940s, and that's how old I think that trope is.
Yeah.
Right. Betty White was a young woman when that was a trope, but that all said, right? That very rarely happens. I mean, you can get away with it to some degree if it's the right context, but by and large, the mustache twirling villain doesn't work. What does work is, okay, what's the pathos? How did you become this? What part of you that I can understand? Because that's the part where I will feel for you on the one hand, but also might even want to root against you.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Or the other way you can go is like total fun. Like, you look at like Freddy or Jason or even the Joker to some degree. They're not real people, but there's something else, almost like they're forces of nature.
Sure, yeah. And all of that is fun because you get to tap into those things that you never get to act out in real life, and that 99% of the people out there don't want to actually act out on, but they're still there under the surface, and being able to use that, it's always fun.
Oh, absolutely, that's the best part. But I mean, also, especially with audiobooks, right? The characters really have to be engaging. They really, really have to be. And as somebody who is playing a character, no matter if it's a comedy or a drama or whatever the case may be, what do you generally voice? What kind of stories?
Well, so I'm about half and half nonfiction and fiction. In the fiction, I've done quite a few in several different genres: science fiction, historical fiction. In fact, I did 2 back-to-back that were completely unrelated, historical fiction that happened just after the Civil War. It was just kind of a funny, happy coincidence, and it was great doing a second book where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember the other guy mentioned this too. So I've done some historical fiction. This past year I've done, I think, more romance than anything.
Really?
Yeah, and so quite a few different genres, and I really actually like that. I know that there are some audiobook narrators who really focus on romance, and it's a great genre, and it has a rabid following. People who like romance audiobooks love romance audiobooks, and so that's great, and I'm really happy that I got into that this year. It was kind of a goal to go in that direction, and I'm glad I did. I don't want to do only that, though. I really enjoy doing a lot of different things.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Variety is good. I mean, it expands your toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, I mean, I guess you should ask, like, what? So, where do you feel are your extremes, or do you feel like you haven't found that yet?
I don't know about extremes. I have found various parts of all genres that I've done to be challenging. It's a challenge. You have to make sure that if you're doing romance and you get in those, explicit sex scenes, that you're not making fun of it, that you're not overplaying it, but that you're being genuine in what you do. I think that is challenging. More so, I think, when you're first starting out in whatever it is that you're learning how to do. But I have found that challenging. I have found some of the terminology in some of the science fiction stuff, a little challenging. I haven't really thought about it in terms of, an extreme that I have kind of pushed an envelope and felt that was, more challenging than something else.
Well, no, and that's fair. Like that, I only bring this up because, again, just the range of emotions you can tell. Like there's stories that will make you laugh. There's stories that will romance you. There are stories that make you cry. There's stories that are like really, really heavy duty, like subject matter, and then there's some that are just fluffy as a feather, right? And and every one of them has almost like its own language of how it works. And I'm talking about just with sound, right? How to make it believable. Like romance is I feel romance is very underrated in one very key sense. The work required to make a believable fantasy is actually quite significant, and I think because romance being is so popular. It's really easy to just churn out something that's terrible. It would be very tempting to.
I completely agree with you that it is underrated. Going into audiobooks, I would say not so much in the past year when I've been doing romance, but maybe 5 years ago when I was starting out in commercial audiobooks. I can't think specifically of what I thought at the time, but I would not be at all surprised to realize that 5 years ago I thought, romance.
Totally.
Crap, or something like that. And I could not have been more wrong in thinking that way. What I have found in doing romance is, of course, in any genre, somebody's writing something, some people are going to write well, some people aren't going to write so well, but I have been fortunate to have been involved in some projects now where I thought the writing was great. And you know what? It's a love story. Who doesn't like a love story? Okay, you've got explicit sex scenes, fine, but it's a love story. These are people who have backgrounds and who bring those backgrounds into the story that I'm telling. And I have been really impressed with some of the writing and some of the stories, all of the things that go into making these characters who they are.
Well, for me, I got to do a podcast at a romantic writing festival, and I got to meet and talk to quite a few women from various ages and everything, and the amount of work, it's incredible to me that, again, it's not respected, and it's honestly should be respected at least a little bit more. I don't know, I said,
I completely agree.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Shakespeare per se, but it's definitely that's not an easy genre to crack at all. It takes a lot of work, because something you brought out is, it's really, you have to buy in. Like you really have to buy in what you're doing, especially in genres like that, because if you don't, your audience won't be able to take you seriously because you don't. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I completely agree. Whether it's writing or whether it's the performance in an audiobook, absolutely, it has to be written well, or it does just come across as, schlock. Just like any art form, there's going to be stuff that doesn't resonate with people. But if it's written well, it is difficult to do that, and when it is done well, I think it's great. So my opinion of romance, especially from like 30 or 40 years ago, but even in the past 5 years, has absolutely changed, and I'm impressed with the writers who really do well at it, and I'm also really impressed with the fans who demand a good product.
Absolutely. The
real romance fans, they'll tell you that, oh no, not written very well. I didn't really care about the characters. Well, if you don't care about the characters, it's just not done that well.
As I've gotten older / wiser, well, we're going to hope on the wiser part of this, right? I'm hoping. We could be wrong on this, right? I just realized, characters are ultimately the heart of every story. It doesn't matter what the genre really is, can I get invested in this character in whatever the quest might be? It doesn't matter what the quest is. It could be a jar of dirt. Doesn't matter. Yep. Can I care about this?
Yeah, that I have found that too, and it took me a little while as I was getting into audiobooks. But I mean, I've been a reader since I was a little kid, and I hadn't really thought about it that way. It's like, oh, I love science fiction now, and I went on a Stephen King binge for a while. But the fact is that it's going to be a good story if it's well written, and if you take that story and outer space instead of a forest, it's still going to be a good story if it's well written. It's all about the characters and what it is that they're going through.
Yeah, I mean good literature, written or audio, whatever the case might be, I just realized it's about creating an experience. And that experience, I mean, it can be anything you want it to be. But the real question is, can you get your audience to believe in that experience? That's it. If you can do that, it's good. If you can write it well and get them to believe, it's great.
Yep. Same thing on stage when I used to do stage work. It doesn't matter how outlandish the plot is. You have to make it believable. I was in one play. First Day of School was the title, and it was a ball, and it was about it's a comedy. Not like a classical farce, but it was pretty farcical. But it was about these parents of these kids in suburbia who sort of meet, and they end up doing this like swingers group kind of thing. And it was hysterically funny. I loved it. I thought that it was just so funny. And the reason that the audience responded well was because we sold it. It was kind of a little bit of an out there concept, but if you make it believable, they'll like it.
Well, you don't necessarily have to make a character likable, but you have to make people understand where they're coming from. If you can do that, you have a journey that people can follow to its logical conclusion, and
yep.
that's a big, I guess, especially on stage, and it doesn't surprise me that you've done stage work just based a little bit of how we're just talking back and forth. I imagine. So did you originally start wanting to be an actor, like on stage, or did the voice first? Like, how did that go?
So it was kind of an interesting evolution. I never went into anything thinking I'm going to be an actor someday. Whereas most of my colleagues, that they absolutely started acting at an early age. I did some things that were performance related, but I never thought to myself, I'm going to be an actor. And I never took any classes along those lines. It was not quite 20 years ago when I decided, hey, I quit my job. I've got more free time now. I've heard about this voiceover thing, and so I started taking workshops. And so I started in acting as a voice actor. Well, not exactly. I did actually do a couple of musicals right before I got into voice acting, but it was kind of simultaneous.
Okay, so
and then it just sort of grew from there.
So, do you still do stage work? I'm just asking, or is it more, or is just the audio has just taken over completely?
It has really. I haven't done any stage work in, I think it's 5 years now. I moved to Tucson about 7 years ago, and right away I auditioned for a few theaters here, and I got cast right away. in a couple of plays, and then I wasn't getting cast, and so I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll put this aside, maybe I won't, I'm not really sure. And then starting into the audiobook world, that was about when that happened, and now it's really kind of taken over. I have gotten back into performing, but it's in a choral group. I sing in a chorus, and I think about it now, and I think, if I was going to get back on stage, I'd really have to think about that, because I don't think I could do it all at this point. I could not be involved in this chorus with the rehearsals that we have and the performances that we have, and get involved in stage work and keep doing this audiobook thing.
It sounds to me like you're really happy with where you're at.
I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. Yeah, I mean, in every situation you're going to be able to find things, and unfortunately I'm too damn good at finding things to complain about. But yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at and where things are going. One of the things that they say in the audiobook world is people want to come in and go, I can make money recording audiobooks. Boom. It really doesn't work that way. Generally speaking, there are exceptions, but it really takes a while. And so the common phrase is, remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it really has been a marathon. I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I feel really good about the path, and that I'm at the place now where I think is reasonable for me to be. But it does take a long time to make those connections and get this and be doing what you want to do. But overall, yeah, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. I love the chorus that I'm in. I just got into a small group within the chorus, and so now I'm doing more music. Plus, I'm doing, audiobooks during the day, so it's good.
So you're using your voice in a variety of ways and having fun the whole way through it. I can kind of
yeah, absolutely.
I can kind of relate to you in terms of like I started this podcast by accident, and I didn't go in this with the idea of I'm going to make money doing this. But it's starting to happen now, but it wasn't the plan. The plan was it was just do what I love to do and kind of just go along this path and kind of see where it leads me. And it led me down this way. It's great, but I tell people when I do presentations, don't expect to make money right away doing this unless you're really, really lucky or you're really, really good.
Yeah, I completely agree. As a fellow podcaster, I totally understand that. And I was the same way. I didn't go into the podcast thinking I would make money. And given the amount of time that I spend preparing each episode and the amount of money that's coming in, it really isn't a good money-making venture. But I love doing it. I have met so many great people doing it. I'm thrilled with how it has turned out, and I really appreciate the financial support that I have. But it's not like, it's a job for me at this point.
Yeah, no, I get you. No, for me, like the strictly speaking, no, the people you meet are incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done like 300 episodes. I mean, you've talked to a lot of people.
Yeah,
I think I'm only up to about 60 at this point.
But yeah, no, it wasn't like I said. I didn't do this with a plan. My case, I was doing written interviews. I've been doing interviews for about 20 years. And what ended up happening was I finally got a smartphone. Like, yes, I finally got to the 21st century. And I was like, and I wasn't thinking podcast. I was just like, I can now transcribe my interviews just straight up. I don't have to memorize everything now. I can just worry about the interview, not worry about trying to retain anything in there. Because I used to do it, memorize, write it down, send it out to people, make sure I didn't misquote them in any way, shape, or form.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Well,
that's amazing. I don't think I could manage that.
Well, it was my elementary school lessons on memorizing stuff. They definitely came in handy. Let me tell you.
That's great.
Yeah, I got something from elementary school. The ability to remember stuff, but that's okay. I interviewed Rob Sawyer, and I can't even remember. We had a pretty good interview, pretty good back and forth, and I recorded it, and we got out, and I don't even remember who he talked to. Just where'd you go? It's like, oh, I was getting interviewed by this guy for a podcast. I did not have a podcast in my head at this point, and I just thought to myself, why couldn't I do a podcast? And that was it. That's literally been it. What I found in my case was my demand for interviews went up really quickly, and my audience followed shortly thereafter. And I was like, okay, this seems to work. I'm not sure why this is working. But
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. That's what happened with me. Your case, I feel, maybe a little different.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I went into it with the thought, I mean, when I started the Audiobook Speakeasy podcast, it was because I looked for podcasts about audiobooks, and the podcasts that I found, there was nothing wrong with them, but the focus was on the audiobooks, and what I was more interested in was the process of creating an audiobook. And so I wanted to talk to narrators who could tell listeners like me how it is that they got into it and how it is that they do what they do. I wanted to talk to engineers who can talk about the process of not just, recording or speaking into a microphone, but once you do that, then what happens? What do you do? And how did you get into that business? Maybe somebody who's listening who's frustrated with the narration side actually feels really comfortable with the engineering side and would want to go that direction. I want to talk to, directors and producers and various other people who are involved in the industry. For someone like me, who's, a relatively new narrator, at that point I'd been doing it for a couple of years, but I wanted to, to hear what other people were doing to create the audiobooks, not just a review of the audiobooks that were out there. And so there really wasn't any thought of, well, this is going to, have a wider audience at some point, and so then eventually it could be more of a money-making thing. It has pretty much continued as the way I started it, which is just something to offer to other people who either are now or were at some point in the position that I was, where you want to hear from these people in the industry.
It sounds to me like your podcast is one part what I do, actually, because it's like we're just having a conversation. I mean, we've talked about your stuff, but we've talked about just life in general too, right? And that sounds like when you interview a narrator, feels like that, like you go into that stream a little bit. You talk about their process, but you're also talking about them, who they are, what they do, and how they got there, which is very huge. But then you're also one part education too, because you're basically teaching people how to build their own books as well, because you're talking to engineers, you're talking to producers, directors, and just the advantages of being in a team, and also just like you're basically building a roadmap.
Yeah, definitely. And just going back to the first point the second point that you made there about who the narrator is. Yeah, that's been a core piece of what I do with the podcast. I spend at least 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning, after talking about what they're drinking, talking about talking about where they came from and where they went to school. And the reason that I do that is because I'm somebody who's really curious about people. If I meet somebody, I'm really curious about who made you, how did you get to where you are, not just in the business side, but, where'd you go to school? What were your experiences like? And so if I meet somebody and find out, oh my gosh, you grew up 5 miles from me, that would be of interest to me. And then when I meet that person in person, I can talk to them and say, oh, what about this place and what about that place? Or, whether it's the same part of the country or the same school that you graduated from, or whatever it is, I think that it's interesting to know that about people. And so I want to introduce people to these, well-known names, or sometimes not all that well-known, but people in the industry, not just as I'm a narrator, I'm an engineer, but as people who had experiences getting to where they are, just like you did.
Well, like for me, it's this is how I look at it. Everybody's got a story, good, bad, and different. Everybody's got a story, and the thing about that is it's always fascinating. Because, again, the cool thing about life in general is we all have the same starting point and essentially the same end goal. But the experience in the middle is different for all of us, and how we see it and interpret it is unique to us. So I want to know who you are, because there's never going to be someone quite like you again, number one. And number two, I mean, that's what draws people to you. It's not what you do is great, and what you do is what people will come to you for specific skills and stuff like that. But it's who you are as a person that will bring people to you, but also will keep them coming back.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah. So I got, since we did skim over the drinking part of this interview, I feel like I should make up for that real quick here. So
That's my podcast, but if you want to talk about drinking, that's fine too.
Yeah, listen, I can steal. Why not?
Why not?
Why not, right? I mean, I have a podcast coming up with Kat Flannery. It will air before this one does. We talk about whiskey really quick. I mean, it does happen.
Oh, cool.
Well, I am Canadian, dude. We do drink up here, right? So.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't realize you were up there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Canadian whiskey. Good stuff.
Yeah, well, Canadian booze is generally good stuff. Generally.
I just heard a great podcast episode specifically about Canadian whiskey, and they were talking about they mentioned the fact that, for bourbon, for American whiskeys, and for scotches as well, there are really very kind of stringent guidelines on how you make something in order to be able to call it bourbon or scotch or whatever, or single malt scotch, or the various different designations. Whereas in Canada, the distiller that they were talking to, the master distiller, was really excited about the fact that in Canada, the restrictions are not so great. And so you can distill things different ways, and you can use different mash bills, and you can do it in a lot of different ways. And he really liked the fact that allows them a lot of creativity.
Well, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There is something to be said about a standard, right? Standards are good. Standards are good, but when you know what the rules are, you can't really deviate from it too much. I mean, there's always something you can find, but chances are someone somewhere has done it before. But if you know the guidelines of what is good, you have an idea what that is, but now you limit the limitations on yourself. Who knows what you can find, right? Who knows?
Exactly. That's exactly what he was talking about. He was saying, how important it is to know, well, how much of the mash was rye, but he said, I can make a very different whiskey if I do it in a pot still versus if I do it in this other kind of still or this other kind of still or this kind of process. Totally changes the character of the whiskey. And so he likes the fact that it was that he didn't have some of the restrictions that other places do. And it sounds like he was turning out a good product.
Yeah. It's true. Like when I do go to the States, I tend to always go with the craft beers at this point, or something harder, because I can't drink your regular beer. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody can anymore.
Yeah,
what's out there, given what the options are. Wouldn't work for me. I'm not really a beer drinker anymore, but it wouldn't work for me.
No, I mean, you got your martini with how many olives at this point?
3. There's still 2. I'm about to hit the second one.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, it is about to go, but
martini is a common drink here in the Speakeasy.
But there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yep.
So what's your drink of choice? Is it a martini or is it something else?
Boy, tough question. I've learned a lot in the past couple of years, getting into different recipes. I would say that the biggest class of cocktails that I drink is gin sours. I love a good gimlet, last word, jasmine. There's a bunch of drinks that are essentially gin and either lemon or lime juice, and then a couple other things. And so that's probably the class of cocktail that I like the most. But I'm a big fan of a good single malt scotch. I'm a fan of rye, and I'm kind of a fan of bourbon, but not quite as much as scotch and rye.
I can't touch on that one.
Lot of different drinks. I like tequila every once in a while. Don't drink tequila very often. Don't really drink vodka very often either, because I find that for vodka, it's mostly about what you mix it with.
Vodka's
never understood.
So vodka for me is my road drink when I'm traveling, because it's a good health drink because it's clean. Gin will work too, but I find gin varies. Vodka's very consistent.
Oh, very much.
Yeah, gin varies big time, right? But vodka doesn't vary that much. Say I can go to
not a whole lot.
No, so I can go to a bar, say in Oklahoma, or a bar in Michigan, right? And I can get a screwdriver, and I have pretty much for short term inoculated myself against anything I may not be aware of, right? Right? Well, because again, you're on the road. You're exposed to things you don't normally get a hold of. So when I go on the road, I do more vodka. When I'm in an area I'm more familiar with, Scotch is the one I'm most careful of because I don't. Again, it's one of those drinks you just don't feel sitting down. So when you stand up later on, it hits you. Hits you hard. And tequila is the one that gives me a hangover. It was the first drink that ever gave me a hangover, and it just, me and tequila do not get along. It really does kill me, little by little.
So I would say that tequila is probably the liquor that gave me the worst hangover of my life.
Yeah.
And it took me, I would say, a good 2 to 3 years before I ever went anywhere near a bottle of tequila again. I will say at this point that part of the reason for that is because it was crappy tequila.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And what I've learned is that that's true for just about any liquor.
Yeah.
Is that if it's crappy liquor, it won't taste as good. It's not that much more expensive to get a liquor that actually is good. And if it's crappy, it's much more likely to make you feel bad.
Yo, it's true. It is true. I just for whatever reason, me and tequila just do not get along. Me and Scotch
I could make you a margarita that would change your mind.
You know what? If I'm ever in your area, I'll take you up on that challenge. Sound good?
That's cool. Where are you in Canada?
I'm currently in Calgary. I'm about to move to BC.
Oh, okay. So you're farther over. We, my wife and I, spent our 20-year anniversary this year in Quebec City.
Okay.
And loved it. And
yeah.
We were also in Toronto about 20 years ago, and we went to Bouchard Gardens, Victoria, back before that, or after that. Loved every trip we've taken to Canada. I want to go back for more now.
Well, absolutely. No. Okay, so for me, I'm from Ontario, so Toronto area I'm from. I like visiting Toronto. I'm not crazy about living there. Just personal thing. Quebec has a ton of cool history. It is one of the Montreal and Quebec City both have some amazing history. It's probably some of the coolest historical spots you can go in Canada. New Brunswick's gorgeous. Alberta, where I'm at, I mean, half of it's boring, but the other half is all it's some of the most beautiful mountains ranges you'll ever see in your life. You've been to BC, Victoria, but Vancouver's pretty cool too, and that's where I'm going. But no, Canada's just a beautiful country.
It was. I will agree with that statement about Quebec. I mean, in Quebec City, I think we went to 2 different museums, and I learned a ton of stuff. Of course, I've forgotten half of it in the past 3 months, but that's the way it is with history with me all the time. We almost always go to museums whenever we travel, and I love it. I love learning this stuff, and I know that I'm not going to retain everything, but I was fascinated by some of the history that I learned about Canada.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, too, because a lot of people don't realize how much the French had in shaping both Canada and the United States.
Yeah, definitely.
If things had gone a slightly different way, our keyboard would have accent aigus on it, actually. And
yep, could be.
Yeah, no, it totally could have. All right, things went the way it did. But it's a huge part of our history, and a lot of people don't realize it. It's big, and Quebec City still has a ton of it. When did you go? What time of year did you go?
June. It was early June.
Okay.
And it was beautiful because June in Tucson, where I live, is typically in the high 90s and low hundreds.
Yep.
And in June, early June in Quebec City, we were getting clouds and rain, and it was in the high 60s and low 70s, and mid 70s, and it was beautiful. We loved it.
See, I've lived in Phoenix, so I know your pain. I do.
Oh yes. Phoenix is even worse than Tucson.
No, I know. It's
about 5 degrees warmer. Yeah.
Well, do you know? I hear the reason why. It's funny. It's ironic as hell. It's the air conditioning. Because everybody's good. No, it's because what happens is, right, everybody turns on the air conditioners because except for me, I was too poor to have an air conditioner in that time. But what happens is, because everybody's using this power, they're actually heating up the area around them. So they're cool, but everywhere around them's warming up even more so.
It certainly does do that. Every time I walk outside when the air conditioning's blowing, I try to stay away from it.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because that's why, because it's the heat. But just imagine, okay, Tucson's a smaller city, so it doesn't have the same impact. But imagine you have a city, 8-10 million people in Phoenix right there doing that?
Yeah, Phoenix is huge. I think that Tucson's still only around 500,000. I'm pretty sure that Phoenix itself is probably 1 million, 2 million, something like that. But Phoenix has a huge suburban population, whereas in Tucson there aren't that many cities around it.
Not at all. It's kind of isolated. I mean, you are still kind of in a desert, but not.
Yeah.
But not, you don't have a large city just blowing air all the way around.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting, right? But that's no. Like I know your pain. Like going like I do like if I were to live in the States again, it would probably be in Arizona. Something about it it's very Wild Westness to it makes me kind of grin every time I go down there. It's like, on one hand, it does have a bit of just stop feel to it. On the other hand, anything kind of goes. It's kind of a unique animal.
Arizona's great. When we moved here, we were really struck when we visited to see how friendly people were. It's like, 500,000 people. That's not a small city. It's a fairly good sized city, but it felt like a small town. And in some ways, it still does to us 7 years later. In some ways, I recognize now, this is, more of a big city, but everybody's still pretty damn friendly. So we're really happy here.
Well, and yes, it sounds to me like you've done fairly well for yourself, my friend.
Like I said, I'm happy with this. My wife owns her own business and works out of the, and overall, things are good. And Tucson really is a cool place. I would invite anybody to come visit Tucson and stay at one of the many really nice resorts that we have. It's really not a very expensive place to visit, and we have some really cool things going on.
It's a nice town. It really is.
Yeah,
it really
absolutely.
Is. Yeah, it really is. My friend, I think we have an interview. What do you think?
All right. Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right. So you got a lot of stuff to plug. So let's assume that this will air November, somewhere between November and January, somewhere in there it airs. You got any books coming out?
I got a few. I just finished one about a month ago that I'm really happy with. It's called Caspian and the White Buffalo, and it's one of those historical fiction pieces that takes place right after the Civil War. And I loved this book. I had done another book for this author, and he wanted me to do this one. I thought, well, I don't know about the time. It's a long book. And then I read it, and I fell in love with it. It's one of those passion projects now, kind of after the fact, where I just fell in love with it. I love this story. This guy is a poet in addition to being an author. His name's Melvin Lytton. And he just paints such a picture. It was a joy to describe what it is that he had created. So there's that. I've got a paranormal romance coming up sometime soon, which will probably be out by the time this airs, called Protected in Darkness. And another one that I'm just about to start, historical fiction, taking place during World War II in Austria and the surrounding area.
That one sounds like fun.
Yeah, different stuff. Like I said, I really enjoy being able to do different things. I don't want to do only one thing.
Oh no, not at all. All right, so we'll assume then, probably for the purpose of the podcast, I'll mention Caspian and White Buffalo, especially considering how much you seem to enjoy it.
I did. It was one of those things where it's like, wow, I have. It was the way it was done. I don't how much it will sell. I don't know how they're going to do any more marketing for it, but it was just a joy to read.
Well, and then that's the best kind of marketing right there. Just say that. I mean, it's joy to read. Okay, so let's talk about your podcast real quick, so people can know where to tune in.
Sure, yeah, it's the audiobook Speakeasy. So you can find it on Podbean. You can find Podbean. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on my website, richvoiceproductions.com. I've got a separate page for it there, and I post all the episodes. And like I mentioned earlier, it's really just about talking to people in the industry. I understand that sort of limits the audience. There are going to be people who aren't interested, but I would say that if you have a lot of authors that listen to your podcast, it might be something they might want to listen to.
to be perfectly honest, it's something I should listen to more because I'm about to do my first audiobook with Marnie's company probably very short.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love Marnie. She's great.
No, she's fun. She's the reason. She's actually, I'll let you know a little secret. You're probably my last interview before I go to BC. I have a lot of interviews in the can, and one of the reasons I went to you is because she recommended you.
Oh, yeah. Marnie's great. I talked to her, 20 episodes ago, something like that. And she's fantastic, and I'm kind of on... I haven't done a book for the Audio Sorceress company yet, but I'm kind of, associated with them. And I look forward to working with her on whatever it is. She takes it very seriously. She's fantastic.
No, she's an amazing human being. I mean, she really, really is. Do you want to mention your Instagram or Twitter or anything like that?
Sure, yeah. So Instagram, I'm at. I can't even remember. I don't post very often. On Twitter, I'm
at Rich Miller.
Okay, so I'm drawing a blank because I don't get over there too often.
Did you eat that second olive yet?
Yeah, I did. Actually.
So just blame the olive. Blame the olive.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
It's the olive and what it was soaking in. So on Twitter, I'm Rich Miller VO.
Okay.
And on Instagram, I think it's the Rich Voice. Let me see if I can pull that up. On Instagram, I guess it's Rich Miller VO as well.
All right, that works.
So,
well,
yeah, keeps it the same.
No worries. When does your podcast air? Do you know? Like how?
Typically, I publish on Sunday afternoon.
Okay.
And it's every other week. It was every week, but as I'm sure you know, as a podcaster, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Then I got really busy with books, and I thought I just can't do this every week. And so I'm doing it pretty much every other week. Every once in a while, I have to skip one because of schedule or work or whatever it is. But generally speaking, it's every other Sunday.
Fair enough.
And that was my conversation with Rich Miller. Definitely check out his books. He's done a lot of cool other things. Rich, if you're listening to this, thank you very much for doing my show. You are welcome back anytime you like. It was truly a pleasure. So let's see, what else can I talk about? This week, I am also do a column at firstcomics.com. I've been reviewing comics classically all over the place. Currently I'm talking about the Ninja Turtles run by Sophie Campbell. I really, really am a fan of it. You should definitely check it out. It's a really, really cool iteration of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Very faithful what came before, but it's definitely Sophie's work. If you've ever read a comic called Wet Moon, Sophie's awesome. Just really, really awesome. You should definitely check out what I say about it, and just my column in general, firstcomics.com. Beyond that, I'm just doing things. I'm hoping to have I'm hoping to be completely stabilized by the weekend. That's kind of the goal. Having to work on what I got to work on. It's a pain in the butt, but it's life. And like I said, man, I'm taking this as an adventure. I have the unique position this time around that I have the freedom to go pretty much anywhere I want and do whatever I want. And that's a nice position to be in. Let's see where things go from here. I got a lot of other things I'm doing right now too. But for now, I'm just taking it one day at a time. All right. That'll do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast and me, you can do so a number of different ways. You can subscribe to the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podomatic. I am on YouTube as Joshua Pentellaresco. Past episodes are there. 284 of them will be up there by the time this airs. So you can listen to all of my past episodes there. My merchandise is at jpentellaresco.redbubble.com. You want to buy a t-shirt, mug, support the podcast that way, feel free to do so right now. Beyond all that, my books, The Watcher's Storm Dancer, Wandering God, are available at miraclepublishing.com. Definitely check them out. Let's see here. What else can I talk about? My column is at First Comics. My Twitter, Instagram is at jpentellaresco. My Facebook page is Joshua Pentellaresco, author, podcaster. Check me out. And beyond that, stay inspired. Keep doing your thing. Good things will happen. Just ride the wave and be dangerous be driven, be disciplined. All right, guys, take care.
Josh. Shush.